Smartphones, the successor of the early landline telephone. In this day and age, you can't live without one. Which also begs the question, if everyone has a smartphone, how many are there in the world and how many are made on a daily basis, every day? Better yet, what are the environmental and economical impacts of these processes? Well, in this video we will dive into those effects. According to a 2025 article by Keith Carlson, on the website Test My Speed, there's an estimated 7.43 billion smartphones in the world, and they estimate it'll be 7.56 billion by 2026. That is an 130 million smartphones increase, which is absolutely bonkers. However, not all these phones are in use. According to the same source, only about 5.58 billion, or 2 in 3 phones, are used on a daily basis, although that is still a crazy, mind-bogglingly high number. But this begs the question, if everyone has a smartphone, and those smartphones are updating so often as they are, how many phones are made every day or every week? According to a 2023 article for iPhone production, there is a factory in Zhengzhou that manufactures over 500,000 smartphones per day, just iPhones, on its own, with a whopping 350,000, or a third of a million employees in that one factory. While there isn't much information or data about a specific number of phones made globally on a daily basis, it's estimated that of every single factory, every single brand, and every single model, there are around 20 million smartphones made every single day across the world. Now, with tens of millions of smartphones made globally every day, there are bound to be some health, safety, and financial problems for phones to be sold so cheap as they are. First of all, before we talk about that, let's look at what our phones are made of. The average smartphone contains heavy and expensive elements, including, but not limited to, cobalt, gold, lead, copper, aluminium, lithium for the battery of course, nickel, silver, gallium, which is an expensive liquid metal, tungsten, zinc, and the list somehow keeps going. All of these metals are very expensive. Now, as most people would know, a lot of these metals don't come cheap. I would tell you which one specifically, but I'd basically be naming all of them again. And another thing that many people would know is that the extraction process for a lot of these metals doesn't come easy or cheap. And that is a segue to our second to last topic. Now, I'd like you to think about how much the average smartphone costs. Depending on where you get it from, it normally ranges between $250 for low-end phones to $2,000 for high-end phones, with an average middle ground of around $1,200 for your average expensive but not quite expensive phone. But if you know anything about the prices of these metals, you'd know that the prices are much too low and someone must be getting ripped off in this deal, right? Well, this intuition is sadly correct. In places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC for short, people are effectively forced to work in cobalt mines every day, not to mention how dangerous they are, for a very little amount of money in return. The average adult cobalt miner in the DRC earns between $2.15 and $8.50 a day, which isn't even enough for a small meal at McDonald's for yourself, let alone your whole family. Plus, if you're observant, you may notice that I clarified the word adult, and that's because there's sadly a lot of child labor in that area, with the average child getting paid between $1.25 and $2.50 per day, which is simply sad to think about. This is mostly because the adults don't get paid enough to support their families themselves, so they are forced to choose between taking their kids to school or taking their kids to work. And a lot of the times it is easier for them to just get their kids to go to work, so then they'll have enough money to be able to at least afford one meal per day for their family. And the DRC isn't the only place with these issues. Other poor countries around the world suffer from being exploited every single day by richer countries and people, with barely enough money to survive themselves. But alas, we now arrive at our final topic, the environmental impact. Besides the humanitarian impact, smartphones aren't really good on the environment either. The mechanized processes of manufacturing smartphones require crap tons of electricity, and in places like China, that electricity mostly comes from coal power plants. And that's not even including the emissions caused by transport or mining operations before materials even make it to the factory. While there isn't much data about how much pollution the smartphone manufacturing process causes, there are many estimations with daring results. An estimated 7% of all global carbon emissions are caused by smartphones. May not sound like a huge number, but that doesn't mean there isn't much in the way of smartphone emissions. That just means there's way too much other pollution in the world to blow it out of perspective. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to tell you to boycott or stop using smartphones or stop buying a new one, since that is basically impossible in this day and age, but instead keep your phone until it dies. For instance, this video was filmed, edited, and posted on my Samsung S9, which is 7 years old and still works well enough for me to record this, so whoop-de-doo. Anyway, you've reached the end of the video and the conclusion. While smartphone production may have bad humanitarian effects and environmental effects, just remember that you can help slow these effects down by keeping your phone until it dies. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.